It started as an innocent day of sightseeing, until a stranger began following me, taking my picture over and over again, but I never saw his face. The city was alive with energy. Crowds gathered at the famous landmark, a place filled with tourists snapping photos, laughing, and enjoying the warmth of the sun. The hum of the city echoed around me as I stood at the viewpoint, my camera in hand, capturing the beauty of the skyline. I thought I was just another tourist, blending into the scene, taking in the sights like everyone else. But something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. Was I being paranoid, or was I really being watched? He kept taking my picture, but I never saw his face. My name is Maya. I'm a freelance photographer. I've spent the last few months buried in work, trying to build my portfolio, trying to make a name for myself in a world that doesn't slow down. But lately, the work's been piling up, and my energy's been running out. I needed a break. A day to clear my head, a day to focus on something other than the endless deadlines. That's why I was here, in this vibrant city, trying to shake off the burnout. It was supposed to be a day of peace and inspiration, a chance to recharge and capture the beauty of a city I'd never seen before. I was calm, relaxed, and completely unaware that everything was about to change. As I was snapping a few pictures of the skyline, a movement caught my eye. Across the street, I saw him, a man standing in the crowd, his eyes locked on me. I couldn't explain why, but something about his gaze made my skin prickle. At first, I shrugged it off. He was probably just another tourist, doing the same thing I was. But then I glanced back, and he was closer, his camera raised. He wasn't just taking pictures of the city, he was taking pictures of me. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. There was something unsettling about the way he was standing there, his eyes still fixed on me. It wasn't normal, and it didn't sit right. I turned away, hoping to shake off the unease. I told myself it was nothing. I was just imagining things. I needed to focus on my photos, on the city, on anything other than the strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. But when I turned back, he was still there, camera raised, snapping another shot. I couldn't believe it. I stood there for a second, frozen. Then I watched him. He clicked the shutter once more. It was then that I realized he was following me. My heart skipped a beat. My mind raced, trying to come up with an explanation, but none came. Should I confront him? Should I say something? The thought of making a scene terrified me, but I couldn't just let this go. I glanced around, hoping for some kind of sign that I wasn't being completely paranoid. But when I moved to a new area of the landmark, I saw him again. He was behind a crowd of people, his camera up, and his eyes still trained on me. I moved quickly, trying to put distance between us, but each time I looked over my shoulder, there he was, closer, always snapping pictures. My discomfort grew into something more. It wasn't just the odd feeling anymore. It was fear. I could hear the distinct sound of his camera shutter clicking in the distance. This time, I knew for sure, it was aimed at me. I thought maybe if I left the landmark, if I walked down a quieter street, I could escape him. I needed to get away from the crowds, away from the chaos. I just wanted to be alone for a few minutes. I stopped at a small cafe, grabbed a coffee, and sat near the window, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. But as I looked across the street, there he was again, standing outside, watching me. I wasn't imagining it. He was there, staring at me, his camera raised once again. My stomach twisted, and I felt the coldness of panic creeping in. How long had he been following me? Every time I looked around, he was there, lurking in the background, clicking away with that damn camera. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was overthinking everything. It was probably nothing. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling. I felt sick to my stomach, but I tried to force myself to stay calm. Maybe I just needed to get back to my hotel, get some rest, and forget about the whole thing. Just as I was about to leave, my phone buzzed. I looked down, and my heart stopped. The message was from an unknown number. "Nice shot, Maya. Hope you don't mind me taking a few more." I froze. How did he know my name? How did he know who I was? I felt the blood drain from my face. Was he tracking me? Was he watching me online? I didn't know, but the fear that had been simmering inside me now boiled over. It wasn't just a coincidence anymore. He was watching me. And he knew my name. By the time the man had followed me through the streets, I was reaching my breaking point. My mind raced with questions and fear. Why was he doing this? What did he want from me? My body felt like it had been running on adrenaline for hours, and the sense of unease had grown into something much darker, something much more dangerous. I couldn't take it anymore. There was no more denying it. This wasn't a random encounter. This was something deliberate, something planned. I needed answers. I had to face him. I squared my shoulders, gathered whatever courage I had left, and walked straight up to him. His back was to me, but as I approached, I could see the outline of his face in the corner of my vision. He was still standing on the corner, camera raised, his hood pulled low enough to obscure his face. My pulse raced, but I forced my feet forward. The city was still bustling around us, people walking by without a care, unaware of the tension that had slowly built between us. "Hey!" I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Why are you following me?" The man turned slightly at the sound of my voice, but he didn't respond. Instead, he simply tilted his head as if to acknowledge my presence, then brought his camera up, snapping another picture. His calmness made my blood run cold. I felt a sickening wave of frustration wash over me. I took another step forward, raising my hand to grab the camera out of his grasp. This had gone far enough. But before I could reach him, he stepped back. His movement was fluid, practiced. He backed into the crowd, disappearing among the people, but the camera never stopped. The shutter clicked again and again as he retreated. I stood there, my hand still reaching for something that wasn't there. I watched him melt into the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. What the hell was wrong with him? Why wouldn't he say anything? Why was he doing this? Just as I turned to walk away, a buzz from my phone snapped me back to reality. I looked down. Another message. "You didn't like that, did you? Don't worry, I've got plenty more shots of you to add to my collection." I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't just a stranger with a camera anymore. This was something much worse, much more sinister. It wasn't about the photos anymore. It was about control, about watching me, about making me feel powerless. The world around me felt distant, unreal. The crowds that had once seemed vibrant and full of life now felt like an oppressive backdrop. Every person seemed like a potential witness to something that didn't make sense, a scene unfolding that no one seemed to notice. I was being stalked. The thought sat heavily in my chest. It wasn't just the photos. It wasn't just about some creepy guy taking pictures of me. It was more than that. This man had a grip on me, on my thoughts, on my every movement. Every time I looked over my shoulder, he was there, watching. Each click of his camera was a reminder that he was in control, not me. I tried to calm myself, rationalize it, but the growing fear inside me made that impossible. There was no reasoning with this, no escaping it. I needed help. I had to do something. I reached for my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed the police. This is a joke, I thought. They'll take me seriously. This is what they're here for, right? But when I explained the situation, I was met with nothing but indifference. The officer on the other end of the line dismissed my concerns, telling me it was likely a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting. "Probably just a tourist, ma'am. People take photos all the time," the voice on the phone said flatly. I could feel my frustration rising again. I wanted to scream, to tell them what I had seen, to make them understand how deeply wrong this was. But all I got was an assurance that if it escalated, I should call back. Escalated, I repeated to myself, feeling utterly hopeless. I hung up, a sense of dread settling over me. I wasn't going to get the help I needed from the police. Not unless something worse happened. I walked through the city, my feet dragging beneath me, my thoughts clouded by the feeling that I was being followed again. And then, just as I turned down a quiet alley to escape the noise of the city, I bumped into someone. A stranger. He looked at me with concern, his eyes wide. "Are you okay?" he asked. His voice was friendly, almost caring. I almost let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, things weren't as bad as I thought. But then I looked up. And there he was. The same man. The one who'd been following me all day. His camera was raised, aimed directly at me. My stomach flipped. My heart raced, my breath quickened. I didn't hesitate. I ran. My feet hit the pavement in a blur as I sprinted down the street, my mind consumed by one thought: escape. I didn't know where I was going, but it didn't matter. I just needed to be far, far away from him. Behind me, I heard the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. I could hear him getting closer, always right behind me, always a step ahead. I had no idea how long I ran. It felt like hours. Every time I looked over my shoulder, he was still there. Every time I thought I might have lost him, I'd hear the snap of his camera again, closer than before. Eventually, I made it back to my hotel. I was exhausted, physically and mentally. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door, pushing it open and stepping inside. The familiar smell of the room didn't offer any comfort. It felt empty, as if I were standing in a place that wasn't mine. I set my camera down on the table, still reeling from the events of the day. My phone buzzed again. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I looked at the screen, expecting another message. Instead, there was an envelope on the bed. It had my name on it. I opened it, my fingers trembling as I pulled out the contents. A Polaroid photo. It was a picture of me. The same one I had taken earlier in the day, at the landmark. But this one was from an angle I couldn't have seen, a perspective that was too far off for me to notice at the time. I stared at the image, frozen. The photo wasn't just a picture of me in the city. It was a picture of me in a moment of calm, the exact details of my face, the way the light caught my features. It was intimate, and it made my skin crawl. How long had he been watching me? How many other photos did he have of me? I threw the first Polaroid down, but before I could collect myself, I opened another envelope. This one was different. This time, the photo wasn't from the city. It was from inside my hotel room. I felt the world tilt beneath me. The photo showed me in my room, sitting by the window, my face reflected in the glass, the curtains wide open. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe. I backed away from the photos, my hands shaking uncontrollably. How was he here? How did he get in? There was only one explanation. He was closer than I thought. He had been watching me all along, even inside the supposed safety of my hotel. I felt exposed, like a specimen under a microscope, and the worst part was, I couldn't escape him. My phone buzzed once again. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me as soon as I stepped inside my hotel room. Panic gripped me with such force I thought I might break. My hands were shaking uncontrollably as I locked every window and door, checking the peephole every few minutes, convinced that somehow, he was right outside. I could still hear the soft click of his camera in my mind, like an echo in the silence of the room. The room that was supposed to be my refuge now felt like a prison. The walls seemed to close in on me with every passing second, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, waiting. My breath was shallow, my body drenched in sweat despite the cool air in the room. My heart raced as I stood by the door, listening to every sound outside the walls. Was he out there? Was he watching me through the peephole? Or was he somewhere else, biding his time, waiting for me to slip up? I couldn't trust anything anymore. I had to get out of this room. But how? I grabbed my phone, desperate for any sign of safety, and checked it. My eyes went wide when I saw the message. "You're a part of my story now. Don't worry, I won't leave until I've finished capturing it all." The blood drained from my face. How did he know what I was thinking? Why was he doing this? My fingers trembled as I dialed the police again, my voice strained with panic. When the operator answered, I barely managed to get the words out. "Please, I'm being stalked. He's following me. He's been taking my pictures, watching me. I need help." But once again, I was met with indifference. "They couldn't help unless there was physical evidence," the officer said. I was beyond frustrated, my head spinning with disbelief. How could they be so casual about something so terrifying? I needed someone to take this seriously. I needed someone to believe me. But there was no help. No one to protect me. I was trapped. I couldn't stay in the hotel any longer. I couldn't let this man control every move I made. If the police wouldn't come to me, I'd go to them. I'd confront this nightmare head-on, even if it meant walking into the lion's den myself. With resolve that I didn't feel, I grabbed my bag and walked out of the room, my steps echoing in the empty hallway. My mind raced. What if he was waiting for me at the police station? What if he had already planned his next move? As I stepped into the elevator, the doors slid shut, and I exhaled in an attempt to calm myself. But before I could even press the button for the ground floor, the elevator dinged, and to my horror, he was there. He stepped inside, his camera still in hand. He didn't even flinch as the doors closed behind him. His eyes were locked on me, and that cold, calculating gaze sent a shiver down my spine. I froze, paralyzed for a moment. He had followed me here. He had been with me the entire time, moving silently through the city, just waiting for the right moment to close in. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. The elevator doors opened, and I bolted. There was no more time to think, no more time to doubt. I ran toward the back exit, hoping to lose him in the maze of corridors. My breath came in ragged gasps, my pulse hammering in my ears as I darted around corners, desperately trying to put as much distance between myself and the man who had been tormenting me. But it was no use. Before I could reach the exit, he was there. He caught up with me in seconds, his footsteps light but relentless. I tried to push myself harder, but he was faster. I didn't know how he did it, but he was always there, always just behind me. In a moment of desperation, I turned to face him. This time, he spoke. "I told you I wouldn't stop until I had you in my collection," he said, his voice eerily calm, as if he were discussing the weather. My mind went blank. The words felt like a punch. "You're crazy," I spat, my voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from me?" He didn't answer, but the way his eyes lingered on me made the answer clear. This wasn't about me. It wasn't about who I was or why I was here. It was about creating the perfect shot. It was about him capturing my fear, my vulnerability, turning it into his art. I tried to wrestle the camera from his hands. I shoved him, hoping to knock it loose. But he was stronger than I expected. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers tightening around my arm with an iron grip. I twisted in his hold, trying to break free, but it was no use. Then, in the scuffle, something unexpected happened. His hood fell back. For the first time, I saw his face. It wasn't what I expected. His face was gaunt, almost sickly pale, with deep shadows under his eyes. His features were unremarkable, ordinary even, yet there was something terrifying in his expression, something that spoke of obsession, of madness. His lips curled into a slight smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that made my blood run cold. I realized then that he didn't care about me as a person. He didn't see me as a human being. To him, I was nothing more than a subject for his twisted project, an object to be studied, to be captured on film. He wasn't interested in my story. He wasn't interested in who I was. He just wanted my fear, my terror, to fuel his sickening need to create. Somehow, I managed to break free. My camera had fallen to the ground during our struggle, and in that moment, I made my escape. My legs were unsteady, my body exhausted, but I ran, my mind only focused on one thing: getting to the police. I ran straight to the police station. My chest was tight with panic, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I felt like I had been running for miles, but the station was still so far away. When I finally burst through the doors of the station, I collapsed. I could barely catch my breath, my chest heaving with the weight of everything that had just happened. "Please," I begged the officers at the front desk. "I need help. I'm being followed. He's been stalking me. He's been taking pictures of me." But when I looked up at their faces, I saw nothing but skepticism. They didn't believe me. They didn't understand the urgency, the terror in my eyes. I could barely find the words to explain everything, but when I did, they were still dismissive. "Do you have any physical evidence? Has he harmed you?" I was left there, alone, with nothing but the memory of the man's cold smile and his camera flashing in my face. He had already won. He had already captured me in ways I would never be able to escape. I felt hollow, as though something vital had been ripped away from me. Later, when the dust had settled, and I'd had a chance to catch my breath, I opened my phone. One last message waited for me. It was from the same unknown number. In the end, I got what I wanted, my art, and you, my perfect subject. But what you never understood was that even though I captured your fear, I could never capture your soul. The message sent a chill through me, but I knew it was true. He had captured me, yes, but he would never control me. This nightmare had been his creation, but I was still here. I had survived. But I would never forget the man behind the camera. And every time I close my eyes, I wonder, will he ever come back? What would you have done if you were in Maya's shoes? How would you have handled the fear, the paranoia, the dread that came with being stalked? Let us know in the comments section. And if you want more chilling stories, hit subscribe. Just don't be surprised if you start feeling watched.